Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the ranking member as well. Um, Let me try to see if I can narrow the scope of my questioning so that Mr. Levin has time as well. Um, and I pose this to either one of you, Ms. Eller or Mr. Reif. We have, as has been discussed, a number of objectives in this Trade Promotion Authority legislation that we submit to USTR, to the administration, to try to achieve. If you look up the definition of an objective, essentially what it means is it's something you hope to attain or accomplish. You're trying to get something done. That differs from an obligation. And in our trade deals, we have a number of obligations for the parties of a trade deal. So I'm correct in saying that there's a difference between an objective and an obligation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So as I look at some of what are considered objectives, one of them, for example, with regard to currency and how countries treat their money. Because what we've encountered over the last several decades is that some countries have figured out a way to game the trading system, with or without a trade agreement, whereby manipulating the value of their currency, they can make their products look pretty cheap. If you keep the value of your currency low compared to, say, the US, all of a sudden that product produced in that country looks really cheap because you're going to end up buying it at in the currency of that country. And what we have found is that upwards of 5 million American jobs have been lost as a result of countries, whether China or Japan, many others, who've gamed the system by playing with their currency and depreciating it, at least for a time, so they can then make their products look cheap. One of the objectives that we have in this trade regime is that we try to work out a deal with partner countries in these trade deals that they stop manipulating their currency. But since that's just a goal and not a requirement or an obligation, if we fail in that goal of getting these countries to stop tinkering with their currency for the sole purpose of gaining an advantage over American companies and American workers, we can't do anything to those countries once the deal is in effect, right?
Well, ultimately, Congress retains the ability, the right, to say this agreement is not enough. So if you make that determination and vote down the agreement, vote down the implementing bill, then you're not faced with that problem of, in other words, if you are unsatisfied with what has come out of the agreement because it doesn't provide enough for, with respect to currency, let's say.
But I won't know I won't know what's in the final trade deal until after I voted to give the administration the authority to move forward on negotiating that deal with one of the objectives, not a requirement, to be to deal with currency. And so isn't that, to me at least, it seems that we're rolling the dice. Rather than try to finally get countries to stop cheating, as they are, we're going to say we have an objective to stop you from cheating. But if we don't do it, then you've got a trade deal that probably moves forward. You're now talking about an up or down vote with no ability to amend the trade deal to say, no, we wanted to have that be an obligation, not an objective to stop countries from cheating. And so there is a very big and important difference between an objective and an obligation. And we could go through any number of these and talk about objectives and obligations. I guarantee you, most Americans, as they try to understand what's going on in this trade deal and this Trade Promotion Authority legislation, are trying to figure out what the heck is good for me. And if they knew that we were willing to move forward in the blind and say something we know is happening out there, which could have cost us upwards of 5 million jobs, is something we only will make an objective but not an obligation to stop, I bet you they'd tell us right now, stop. Make sure that before we let these countries deal with us and have access to our markets, we get them to stop cheating. And if we want to get the companies in these countries to stop cheating, gosh, how are we going to do that if we're letting the countries themselves cheat in the first place? And so my sense is that there's a big difference between an objective and an obligation, and I hope we recognize it. With that, I'll yield back.